Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we're going to be talking about the utterly insane number of magazines that battleships carry. And let's just get this out of the way right away. I'm not talking about the sorts of magazines that go into rifles. I'm also not talking about the sorts of magazines that hold the ammunition for the great guns. There are certainly large numbers of those magazines around. But today we're going to be specifically talking about the insane number of periodical style magazines that the battleship would have carried. It's been a while, I think, since we did an extremely pedantic video, but wanted to bring it back and talk about the magazines on board. So, we've had this magazine rack. It wasn't attached to anything, but it's got the same sort of vinyl wood grain stuff on it that shows up in the officer's lounge. So a couple of years ago, we figured out it must go in here, and we sat it in here, and it's been sitting on the deck for a while. These sorts of things are freestanding. There are other places on the ship where they're just sitting on the deck. Very recently, like within the last month, we realized that the thing sitting right over there was the exact same diameter as these brackets that are mounted here on the bulkhead. And when we looked at it, the screw holes for the brackets lined up perfectly for these. So at some point, probably during the museum era, one of my predecessors took this down. For some reason, I don't know. And then we found it somewhere else on the ship, correctly assumed that it went in this space, because there's all sorts of wood paneling around. Do you want us to do a video on the different colors of wood paneling we have on the ship? We were able to correctly match it to this space, and then, after an embarrassing long period of time, realized that within 6 feet of where we had set it, there was a mounting point for it. But now it's been restored to where it should have been for our 1990 period of interpretation. Now, this, of course, is not the only magazine rack on the battleship. It's not even the only magazine rack here in the wardroom in the officer's lounge area. Shoot, it's not even the only magazine rack that we've talked about on this channel this week. We chose to put it in the corner there where nothing else was going on, which plays out based on this picture, which I'm assuming is also from May of '68, like other pictures that we have that are dated. There is one, of course, down in Dental, which we saw where that was mounted from some historic videos in a video we posted relatively recently. And there's one down there. There's also a similar one down in Medical. There's one in the barber shop. We found out that there's supposed to be one in Chiefs. There's one in the library where you would expect it. And I'm sure there are some other ones that I'm not thinking of. So there's at least a half a dozen magazine racks spread around the ship. It really helps you remember that the battleship she's decommissioned right at the beginning of personal technology. So you start to see boom boxes and cassette tape players to headsets and things like that, the early versions of what we have today. But they're in relatively small numbers and extremely primitive. The sorts of personal technology, like these things that we all carry in our pocket today, don't exist. Guys could not walk around and entertain themselves from that. Even things like earlier handheld video game consoles really aren't prevalent by the time that this ship is decommissioned in 1991. So, a lot of how you're entertaining yourself in your free time, or while you're waiting for things, involves reading. There's a tremendous amount of reading to be done on the ship for qualifications for the various jobs that you have. So, there are all sorts of tech manuals for the various equipment, tech pubs. There are all sorts of handbooks for the different ratings that you have to study pretty well to get advanced. But you can't just read those things all the time. And you probably don't have them on you while you're sitting in the dental lab or medical or the barber shop. It's interesting, there's definitely a magazine rack in the enlisted barber shop. I don't believe there's one in the officer's barber shop, or mounting points for one, which makes it like one of the few spaces on the ship that doesn't have one. Anyway, there would be magazines around that you could read. The ship had a newspaper. You obviously can't get landside newspapers, even though that was a common way of consuming media. The ship did publish newspapers semi-frequently depending on the time period. So those may or may not have been around to be read. But magazines like this were there, and they pulled double duty. A common magazine on the ship is Naval Institute Proceedings, which is a magazine produced by the U.S. Naval Institute, which is home ported down in Annapolis at the Naval Academy. And this obviously has a lot of stuff about the Navy in it. From suggestions for future tactics and things like that are being debated back and forth. Keep in mind the battle carrier suggestion ends up in several back and forth articles in Naval Institute Proceedings. You have a bunch of other similar type things. So you can read this. It's a lot more readable than a tech manual, but it's also giving you information, making you think about your primary job. Magazines, in fact, are so prevalent on battleships, there's even a reference to one in the documentary Under Siege, where they're talking about Miss July 1989, a centerfold from a magazine. What's your favorite kind of magazine? Let us know in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for ways you can donate to support the museum. Your support allowed us to rehang yet another magazine rack where it's supposed to go. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching. Maybe the next pedantic video. Libby, don't make that face at me. It's a great idea. Anyway.